And then I'm looking at this recent, let's say, domination of a certain kind of storytelling. And I'm seeing that something in the tradition that I am very familiar with is missing. It's not really there. And now I'm going to try to describe that thing that I think is missing. I played in my mind a couple of ways of trying to introduce this, and I think perhaps the simplest way is the Western. I studied Westerns for a while, about 10 or 15 years ago, and High Noon is kind of a classically structured Western. It's a 50s Western by a guy named Howard Hawks, and it's a very simple story. There's a sheriff. He is getting married to the pure girl from the East who arrives in town. She's a school teacher. He's going to get married to her, and he's going to give up his sheriff job because he's cleaned up the town and everything's hunky-dory, and he's going to ride off into the sunset with his new bride. And right at the beginning of the movie, the guy he put in jail 7 years ago or so has been unjustly let out of jail and is coming to town. He's going to recreate the bad world that the sheriff had cleaned up. And in the midst of it, he's going to kill the sheriff. His goal is revenge against the sheriff. And the story plays out, in somewhat complicated ways that aren't important to the point I'm trying to make. But of course, the wedding is off. He's now the sheriff again, and no one wants to help him. But the story builds to the point where there's the showdown. Of course, it's at high noon, and there's complications between him and the woman along the way. But in the end, right near the end of the movie, mano a mano in the street, sheriff kills the villain and rides up the school teacher, his bride. He throws down the sheriff's star, and they ride out of town. And that's the end of the movie. Now, that's the thing. The end of that is the thing that I think is missing and has kind of fallen off the map of storytelling recently. And I want to give that thing a little bit more flesh. It's what I want to call a generative arena. It's a circumstance in which the acting out of that world is building the future. It's possibility, and it's a kind of a stable place looking out into an open future. And of course, it's symbolized by a man and a woman and the potential for them to have children. And so that image would change the U-shaped journey of the hero, because it would put the end to be not really an end or the circle that Campbell has, but rather a destination. There would be a real destination there, maybe a plateau that is reached. And that's the goal. That's the telos of that story, of that narrative.
Right.
I'm going to start with James Bond.
Okay.
Because you look at a standard James Bond flick, and it's got almost the exact structure, right?
Yep.
There's James Bond. He's an MI6. He's there flirting with what's her name, and he's a smart guy. He's a great fighter. He's all that. And the crisis. We've got a villain, and he charges out to fight the villain. Bad things happen, obstacles. Alongside is this Bond girl. Oh, there she is, the Bond girl. She's there. She's with him. He's not gonna make it. He's trapped. The fates are against him. Whatever. Overcome the obstacles, destroy the villain, and there's he and the Bond girl in the love nest at the end of the film. And he's so involved in this, relationship that he doesn't even take the congratulations from MI6, as they call, or whatever. It's a classic ending, right? But James Bond is not a father, and the Bond girl is not a mother. That's not part of who they are. And I don't even, someone might say, well, maybe they'll go off again. But no, it's the structure of the narrative, the structure of the character is that they are not that person, in fact. And so there is no generativity there. And what there is eternal recurrence. The only thing that can happen, and obviously did happen on a repeated basis, is that Bond shakes himself off after his tryst and he goes back to MI6 and he flirts with the girl behind the desk and a new villain pops up and off we go again. And, you know, this is a kind of a flat world. The world has nothing really in it except a Bond character at a given age. You know, this is an ageless character, or a, you know, he has no youth and he has no old age, although the guy who's playing him gets older as it goes on, but the character himself is frozen. This is a static and essentially sterile world. And you can have the ecstatic, individual effort, heroic, experiential, you know, kind of seeking out thrills and seeking out experience. That's not necessarily wrong intrinsically, as long as it's feeding, as long as it's got the right telos.
Right.
And in the end, that telos is the generative
future.
Right.
And it's not, and see, this was part of, you know, when I was talking about the hero's journey, what I've seen is that in many ways that, you know, Peterson and many others are framing the hero's journey as a story of self-actualization.
Exactly.
And it's, and certainly there is self-actualization that happens, but that I think is part of the blindness of individualism. And what you actually have in a fuller, better, bigger story that I think we find finally more satisfying is that there's self-realization, self-actualization going on in Sam, in Frodo, but now Frodo and Bilbo's self-actualization is finally in some ways, you know, sacrificial. Now they go off into the gray havens, you know, with the elves.
Right.
But it's, you know, there's a longing and a mourning. And even though in some ways in that universe, the elves are going back to they're returning home. In some ways, the elves in Middle Earth were colonials.
Yeah, it seems to me like Tolkien's kind of not quite wanting to frame exactly what that is supposed to be. I mean, but it clearly is this you know, it's not like it would be right to end the movie with Frodo living in the house next door to Sam with his
wife and child.
That would not be the end. That was not the correct end.